Namaste everyone, and thank you for joining today. I'm gonna talk about the Indian archery, which is like a huge history, and we all grown with seeing a lot of heroes in Indian history, which we have like so many archers throughout the time. So with that, I'm gonna talk about this particular session in three different sections. The first section will going to be more about the archery history or the Vedic literature. And the second one is going to be more in the Dhanurveda in detail. And then the last section would be the composite bow of Indian subcontinent. So let's start the topic. And yeah. So before we can start, I just want to say thank you to Mr. Armir Hamer. He is more like a teacher to me and a great archer. And I learned a lot of basic archery from him like 2 years before and start gaining my interest from him. So he had like a YouTube channel, now we all in the virtual world. So that's where I learned a lot of archery from him. And so I just want to say thank you before we can start this topic. So, in the archery history, the oldest archery prediction paintings or the information we can able to found in Indian subcontinent is actually one of the rock shelter called the Bhimbetka rock shelter. And as per the research, that particular rock shelter is almost 100,000 year old. And there's a lot of other research happened for the paintings on those rock shelters. If you can able to see, there's like a bow and arrow holding, mostly like hunter-gatherer. And those paintings are almost close to 30,000 year old. But in my theory, those paintings could be way older, but for now we know that these are like 30-year old. And another fun factor, I just want to show you guys that in those paintings, if you can see it, we used to domesticate the horses at least 30,000 year old because we have horses from that long. And we used to have like a proper army system and a proper like the tribal system of all the domestication of the horses too. Okay, so for history wise, like the most oldest in India is Vedic civilization, or you can call Sindhu Saraswati civilization. So in that particular civilization, there was like two major cities, Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. And when there was like archaeologists, they dig and they found a lot of different type of arrowheads. If you can see in the picture here, and those are like from the copper and the bronze, and that timing is almost 7,000 BCE to 4,000 BCE of those cities. So we had like use of arrowhead, or I can say like metal arrowheads from at least that older timing. So, and then for the literature purpose, the oldest literature we have it is Rig Veda. And in Rig Veda, when I was doing my research, I found out that the Mandal 6 is actually one of the oldest mandal of Rig Veda. And as per the Nilesh Okji research, he estimated the timeline for Rig Veda is close to 22,000 BCE to 6,000 BC, depend on which mandal of the Rig Veda we are talking about. So if we can assume that this is the oldest mandal of Rig Veda, it's basically somewhat between 22,000 year old. And I just picked like three shloka that from the hymn 75, which is basically called the battle hymns by Payu Bharadwaj. And if you guys not sure aware of it, the Mandal 6 is basically dedicated to the whole Bharadwaj Muni family and his descendants. So is one of the Saptarishi of Indian civilization. And Vayu Bharadwaj basically talk about the hymns of all the battles. So let's go with the first one. What is tell about is like, with bow, let us win the keen, which is cow. With bow, the battle. With bow, be victory in our hot encounter. The bow bring grief and sorrow to the foeman or enemy. With the bow, we subdue all region, which basically tell us the importance of the bow at the Vedic time. And then the second shloka is basically talk about the importance of the arrow and how the arrow looked like it. So of course, in the poetic way, that her tooth a deer dressed in the eagle feather, bound with the cow hide, launch forth, she fly onward. They were the hero. They speed back and forth. They made the arrow shelter and protect us. And then the third shloka in this particular slide is talking about the attack, or like how they used to attack the enemies, like loosen from the bowstring, fly away the arrow, sharpen with our prayers, go to the foemen, strike them home, and let no one be left alive. So these like three shloka I pick up. There is like a lot of other shlokas in that hymn 75, which basically talked about the war chariots and the swords and a lot of other information. But for the bow and arrow, this is one of the three I found is important to share here. Okay. And then the next one is Agni Puran. When I was doing my research, I found that Agni Puran in chapter 9, there's a whole section of Dhanurveda. So before I can talk about that, just a quick note that in ancient India, we used to use that the measurement is basically driven on the length of the bow and the bow grip of the size of the bow grip, or the size of Dhanurmushti, they call it. We can talk more about in the future slides. And that's how they used to calculate all the length at that time, which is actually deriving is like, one dand or dhanu, which is bow, equal to 4 hath, 4 hand, and it is equal to 6 feet. So you will gonna see this particular number a lot in my further slides, which I will gonna show you why. And so what Agni Puran said tell us that they used to have 3 types of bow at that time, or 3 types of material they used to use for building a bow. The first one is the metal, horn, and wood. And what they use, and then they used to have a bow string, which is made up of rattan, as a type of plant, which in Sanskrit called vamsh, and then the hemp, which is the bhang, and then the hide, which is animal hide, which used to call that the twig in Agni Purana. And as per the measurement, they used to say that the 4 hath or the 6 feet bow is the best bow, and then the medium bow is 5.25 feet, and then the inferior is 4.5 feet. While in the metal bow, they say is that the metal bow is made up of gold, silver, copper, and black iron, which is steel. They used to call black iron that time. And the horn composite bow, which basically also talk about in Agni Puran. But the interesting part here that they says that the composite bow is made up of by metal and the horn, and they compose each other with some glue and then use as a composite bow. While like in the later time, I can say around 2000 year till now, most of the people using the composite bow made up of wood. They compose with the wood and the horn, with the sinew and the animal glue to make the composite bow. But in this particular literature, I found that they used to use the metal and the horn. And then another one, they say is like what type of wood they used to use it when they make a long bow, which is the 6 feet one, as the sandalwood, salwood. Sal is a type of tree from India, and Dhanvana and Kukubba. And but this is like the bamboo, which is grow in autumn and cut at the same time, is the best bow, best of all. And then the Kautilya also talk about, not too much detailing, but some section of chapter 9, when he's talking about the army preparation and how to take care of their weapons. And that particular section, he says that he basically talk about different type of material also, that palmyra, which is like a coconut tree, and in Sanskrit they call tala, and then bamboo, he used to call it a chop. Chop is just a curve, but he used bamboo as a chop, and then wood, which is daru, and horn as a saranga. So excuse me, a lot of people heard the name saranga. Saranga is actually like, saranga dhanu or saranga bow is actually a horn bow, because sarang is a horn in Sanskrit. And then the bow made up of palmyra is used to known as karmuka in Kautilya time. And then the bow made up of bamboo used to call kodanda bow. And then the bow which is made up of wood used to be known as druna at his time. and then while the horn composite bow used to call dhanu. And then these are the material he's talking about to use the bowstring, which is murwa, arka. This is again the type of plants he using it. Asana, gavedu, bamboo bark with venu, and the sinew. Sinew is the animal sinew he's talking about here. While in Jatakas, which is the Buddhist text, is talking more about the ram's horn bow most of the time, but it is likely they are using bamboo and wooden bow also, but they're not talking much about it. They always talk about ram's horn bow. Now you can see I put the picture of the Takshila and also the Takshila University. The reason I did it here, because this is just a 3D model, was basically worked by a guy named Salman Suraj, something, I don't know exactly his full name, but he's from Lahore. And he did like a 3D model based on how the Takshila University kind of looked like it. And why I put it here, the reason because the Takshila University is one of the main university during 700 BCE till 499 AD before it was destroyed. And it was basically one of the main center for teaching Dhanurveda or Shastra Vidya. And that's why I just want to tell as a history purpose that this is one of the main center for archery and Dhanurveda at that time. And another thing is, like, if you see in this picture, you can able to see there's an archer whose name is Janmejay. He is a grandson of Abhimanyu from Mahabharata and a great grandson of Arjun, the hero of the Mahabharata. And he's talking with the Maharishi Vaishampayan, and a lot of people probably aware of it, but I just want to say that Vaishampayan is one of the Maharishi who basically narrated first time the whole Mahabharata. And also, like, Vedavyasa wrote it, but he's the one who narrated it to Janmejay. And at the same time, when Janmejay asked a question about the politics and Niti and Dhanurveda, then Vaishampayan teach him the Dhanurveda, which is one of the most oldest book. I can able to find it under the name called the Niti Prakashika. And this particular conversation also happened in Takshila. So that's why Takshila was used to be one of the major center for archery and Dhanurveda. Now let's go in the Dhanurveda in detail. So before we can go, we can see that, like, there are the four main books of Indian religion or our Sanatan Dharma, which basically have Rig Veda, Yajurveda, Samveda, and Atharvaveda. And out of four Vedas, which are basically divided into four different sections, is Samhita, Brahmana, Aranyaka, and Upanishad. All that, from all four Vedas, there is four Vedas was derived. And from Rig Veda, Ayurveda, which is science of life and medicine, was derived. From Yajurveda, Dhanurveda is derived. From Samveda, Gandharvveda is derived, and from which is the science of music. And then the Atharvaveda is Atharvaveda or Arthaveda or Arthashastra is derived, which is political science. Now, in the literature point of view, I found like a Niti Prakashika, of course, which is going to be the main in the detail. And then there is a Dhanurveda attributed to Lord Shiva and Dhanurveda of Vasishtha. And then the Yukti Kalpatru by King Bhoj and Kodandamandana. And then the Manasolas by King Someshwar, and the Sangam literature, and the section of Sangam literature, Purna Nuru. So let's just briefly talk about these three. So Dhanurveda of Shiva and Vasishtha is almost identical. There is, I can say, only 10% different, like one or two shloks here and there, but it's almost the same, the way it is upgraded or written. And the Dhanurveda of Shiva and Vasishtha only focus on the archery, versus Niti Prakashika is talk about all kind of weapons. There's a number of weapons they talk about, with how they look like, how they used to use, and how you can hold it, like pretty detailing. Versus, and then Yukti Kalpatru is more like an encyclopedia, that how the king's supposed to rule and how the people living that time kind of like at the area of the Dhar, which is central part of India. So that's what the Yukti Kalpatru is. And in that particular book, they talk a little bit about how the military was looked like and how they used to use different weapons. So it doesn't have much detailing the way Dhanurveda or Niti Prakashika have, but it's a pretty much good information. And then Kodandamandana is one of the most rare book I found, because in my knowledge, there was only 1 or 2 manuscripts remaining, and one is in the British Museum, and one is, I think, in the somewhere in the Maharashtra. And I just found out like a week before, and somebody uploaded the whole manuscript copy on archive.org, and that's where I can able to, but it's almost unreadable right now, so it's need to be kept clean and able to see if it is readable. And Kodandamandana, like a lot of people in early 19th century did some research, and they say Kodandamandana basically talk about 18 different type of bows, and also have a lot of other archery information, which is defined in 22 chapters. But we don't have any translation or anything, so it's really hard to know what exact information in it. And Manasola is also similar like Yuktikalpatru, which is all like encyclopedia, and they follow thoroughly about what the Dhanurveda is talking about. And then the last one is the Sangam literature, which basically talking about more the glorification of the heroes of that time. And that's what they put in the information there. So they don't have like proper detailing, like technical details of Dhanurveda, but they have pretty much information about how the archers used to be and how the heroes were at that time. So it's pretty good information there too. So in the introduction, like, we know Dhanur is bow and Vidya is knowledge. So that's how they derive the word Dhanur Vidya or Dhanur Veda. And this particular timing in this table is basically the most auspicious time as per the Shiv Dhanur Veda or Vasishtha Dhanur Veda, that when there is a Sunday, Friday, or Thursday, and for the lunar day, it is the Tritiya Panchami, Saptami, Dashami, or the Triyadashi, and one of those constellation or nakshatra, which is Haste, Purna, Vasu, Pushya. And when all these matches at the time, they say this is the best time to start the Dhanurveda practice. And this is like the timing they start teaching. And at that time, this is like the shishya or a student should do the Havan and prayers, and use the arrow without arrowhead and hit some flowers and put those flowers to Lord Shiva, and in the presence of Guru and then teacher, and start practicing Dhanurveda. And then in Niti Prakashika, we used to have in the olden time that how the knowledge is transferring. They used to put all the records. And in Niti Prakashika, they talk about that how the knowledge transferred from one rishi to another, and who was the creator of Dhanurveda. So Niti Prakashika say that Lord Brahma is the one who created the Dhanurveda, and it's transferred to Maheshwara in 100,000 verses. And then from Maheshwara to Skanda to Indra to Prachetashmanu, and Prachetashmanu to Brahaspati to Shukra or Kavya. So in Niti Prakashika, it's talked the Shukra versus Mahabharata is tell the Kavya. And another difference between Niti Prakashika and Mahabharata is the creator of Dhanurveda is Maheshwara or Lord Shiva, versus Niti Prakashika says Lord Brahma. And rest of the information is almost identical in both the places. And at last, we can see that Vaishampayan to Janmejaya, that's what the current Niti Prakashika copy we have it, which have like 8 different verses. Now in Niti Prakashika or in Dhanurveda, they talk about the categories. There are like 4 different categories of weapons. The first one is the mukta. Mukta, if the word, if you think about, is basically which can able to free or you can able to throw. So that's what the mukta type of weapons are. And in mukta, there are total 12 in numbers, and they define pretty detailing in Niti Prakashika that such as Dhanush, bow, issue. Now, a lot of people probably not sure what the arrow what the arrow call is used to call Ishu. And then the Shakti is a type of a spear, and then Chakra is a disc, and Nalika we'll talk more about in the next slides. And then it's just an example. And then there's a Amukta, which you cannot able to throw. You can hold and fight with it. So Vajra is one of the weapons, and Ili is another name for the sword. And that's like one of the oldest name I found it. And then a Parshu, which is X, and Gosira is another type of weapon. So there are total 20 numbers. They define pretty detailing how it looks like and how they can use. And actually it's like just Ili is like the sword, the chapter 3 or the verses 3 of Niti Prakashika talk about the whole chapter talk about the swords. And then the Mukta and Amukta, which you can either throw or either hold. And it doesn't define the much detailing, but it gives us the names, and it's further defined in the multiple category. One is Astra and another one is Asurastra. Astras, which are 44 in numbers. It's also called Upsamharastra in another version, but Astra and Asurastra is more like a category of Mukta weapons, which are counter missile, which are 5 in number. And then the last one is the mantra mukta weapons, which basically use with the help of mantras. And those are like Vishnu Chakra, Vajrastra, Brahmastra, Kalpasak, Narayanastra, and Pashupatastra. That's what they define in that Niti Prakashika. And now the types of bow. So in Niti Prakashika or Vasishtha Dhanurveda, they both talk about there are 4 type of main bows. First is the Saranga bow, which is basically the bow made up of horn, and then Trinata, which is the bow bend in 3 places, which is normally look like modern day composite bow or modern day recurve bow. And then Venava is the bow, which is basically a long bow and have 6 feet in the length and which can be fully bent. And Vitastika is another type of bow they talk about, which is like a smaller, which is like length of 1 hand, and 1 hand is 1.5 feet. So it's a smaller bow used for a smaller arrows, which I have a picture of all 3, so I will show in the later slides. Now the types of arrows. So in Dhanurveda, this is like there is 5 different type of arrows. First is Purusha, which is masculine in nature. And if you see the shape of the arrow, it is heavier at the end and lighter in the front. It's basically used to target for the strong and tough targets. And then there's 3 or feminine type of arrow, which is lighter in the back side, but the heavier in the front side is used for long distance shooting. And then there's a Napunsaka or important type of arrow, which is like parallel, like looks same, and it's helped for the target practice. And then the Nalika. Nalika is a type of device. I put this picture from one of the Korean movie just to give it like how it can look like it. So Nalika, like the name derive, it's basically like a nully or pipe. So it's like a Nalika have helped to shoot the small arrows, like these type of arrows. And then the Naraka is another type of arrows, which is fully made of iron or steel, like this kind of example. This is just an example. That's not a real arrows, but just to have a glimpse of how it can look like it. Now, the types of target, they also talk about there are 4 different type of target. One is a stir, which is immovable or fixed, and chal, which is a moving target, and chalachal is that it's stationary target hit by a moving archer, and the dvachal is the moving target hit by a moving archer or shooter. Oops. And then they talk about the quality of the bow in Shiv Dhanurveda. So they say there are 2 types of bow, and one is the yogic chop of or practice bow, and the yuddha chop, which is war bow. And another important thing which I learned from my teacher also when I was learning my archery, and I saw in the Dhanurveda, they talk the same thing, that every archer should consider the bow poundage according to their strength. So if the archer select a heavier bow based on like how much heavier bow you can able to pull, make sure that don't get the heavier one, because if you hurt yourself or cannot able to concentrate, it doesn't make sense, because they always say the archer's life is more important than any bow or arrow. And then they say, while considering the Vanovo bow, which is a bamboo long bow, always consider with the 3, 5, 7, and 9 joints in a bow, because it's kind of science so that it doesn't able to break. And they say bow with the 4, 6, and 8 joint are restricted to use. And then they talk about the measurement of all different type of bows. And the first one, let's talk about the divine bow, they said, or the Shiv Dhanush, in another term they used to call it, which was held by Lord Shiva. And the length of the bow defined in Shiv Dhanurveda is 8.25 feet. And that's like really long and heavy bow. That's why they say it's called the divine bow, because not normal person can able to hold that kind of bow and able to use it. They say for the human being, the 6 feet or the charhat, which we already see in multiple slides, that bow is useful for human. And then they say is that if the bow, which has 6 feet and also have a 9 joints in the bamboo joints, it is one of the most auspicious bow, and they have a name called the Kodanda bow. And that particular bow was used by Bhagwan Sri Ram, and that's why he used to be famous as a Kodandadhari Ram, because he used to hold the Kodanda bow. And then the next one is the Sarang Dhanu, or the horn bow. So this is like it was a god Vishnu's bow, and it was has 7 times greater than ordinary bow. Unfortunately, they don't say it's like in the size or in the strength, but in my assumption, it says strength. It must be really heavier bow that not normal person can able to take care of it. And that's why they say it's for the Lord Vishnu. And then over many years, Vishwakarma recreated this bow and make it useful for the human being, and they measure it like 58.5 inch. And then they say the sarang bow is successfully used by the soldiers, which is horn bow, which is successfully used by the soldiers on elephants, and the cavalry, which are the horse archers, while the bow made of bamboo used by the chariot or the foot soldiers. And then they say the measurement of the arrows. So this is like it should be not heavy and very fine, and it's called the reed. It's a type of it's not a bamboo, but it's a type of grass we grow in all over the India. Is in Hindi we can call it sarkand, and the sarkand is the green reed, which they say is not good. It need to be well ripe and have a mature joint to use it, and have a circular or like a rounded proper material to use for the arrows. And the length of the arrows they define, of course they define in the older calculation. So when I calculated, it goes to 30 inch of current time, and thickness will be like a little finger of your hand. And then in mostly in the modern arrows, when we see it, we always see that there are 3 feathers they are using in the arrows. But in Dhanurveda, when I read multiple books, they always talk about that use the 4 feather, not the 3 feather. And they use these birds for feather, like cock with his crane, hamsa, masyanda, which is fisher bird, and kronk, which is heron, and then gradra, which is vulture. So they use these animals' feather for for making of arrows. And then they says like there are 10 different types of arrowhead. If you see in the picture also, it's like armukha. Armukha is to pierce the shield. And it's, of course, in the picture you can see 3D, but it's basically shaped more like a hammer. So that's why they can able to use this heavy arrow to pierce the shield of the enemy. And then another is the Shupra, which is more like a razor blade type, and that's used to pierce enemies' bow, arrows, shoulders. And Gapucha is basically for target practice. Ardhachandra is to pierce the head, neck, or bow of the enemy. And then the Suchimukha is used to pierce the enemy's armor. And Bhalla is more like a spear used to pierce enemy's heart. Vibhalla is to stop enemy's arrows. So if somebody attacking you, they used to use this type of arrows to cut the arrows in air. And then Vasadanta is to cut the enemy's bowstring. And then the Karnika is to basically pierce the iron or steel arrows. And then Kaktunda is basically more like a big knife in the front, and it used to pierce almost all kind of objects. So these 10 arrow are defined in Dhanurveda. And then the different instance and like the shooting, how you can stand and shoot different type of arrows. So there are first two Pratyalidya and Alidya, they says. And if depend on if you're a left-hand shooter, you use the Pratyalidya, and if you're a right-hand shooter, you use the Alidya. And these kind of poses are used for long distance shooting. And Vaishakha is used to hit the complex or invisible, because you can able to bend or like turn your body while you're standing in this position. And then the Sampada and this is Sampada and Padmasana is used to target practice, and Asampada and Dardmurg. So Dardurkram is this particular pose, and Asampada is this pose. But in this particular pose, that your back leg is supposed to be more straight, and then the front leg is to be bent, which I will show you in the next picture, is used to hit the hard, and these two poses are used to hit the hard and difficult target. And the Garurmukh is this, like when you bend one knee and then like more like a sitting position, and these are mostly used by the chariot archers. And then Gurmusti is basically how to bowl the bowstring. So the first one is called the Pataka Musti, where you basically holding an arrow. You can see my pictures here that is holding with your forefinger. And it's basically used for Nalika also, because in Nalika you have like, you can put your finger and hold the finger pretty okay here. And then it's used for long distance shooting. And then the Vajramusti, or in the modern time, we call it as a thumb draw, and which you can basically fold your thumb first and then make a grip on the top of it, and use for Naraka or heavy metal at distant target. And Shikhanda Musti is more like this type of Musti, where you basically use your first or second finger to hold the string, and then use your thumb to grab the arrow. And it used to hit the strong and hard targets. And then the Masakarni is this particular shaped like a fish head, and you basically use this grip to hit the camouflage type of target, which you can't see properly. And then the Kaktundi is more in, like in the modern term, we call as a pinch draw, that you basically pinch it with your forefinger and the thumb. And it used to hit the minute target or like a small distance targets. And then the Dhanur Musti Sandhana is like method of holding a bow. So there are three type of Sandhana they talk about. Other Sandhana, which is lower draw, Urdha Sandhana, which is upper draw, and then some Sandhana, which is parallel draw. And then the method of drawing a bowstring. So there are 5 methods, but 3 are more common nowadays. We can use it. The first one is the Kishikvya, which when you have like a long draw bows, when you can able to pull the string till back of your hair. So it's for the longer arrows and the longer draw bows. And then the Satvik Vyaha is the similar manner, but you can pull up to the top of your head and have more long arrows. And the Vasakarna is just behind your ears. So you can pull the arrows till just behind your ear. And then the Bharatvya is about up to your neck, which is more like for parallel draws to use. And the Iskandavya is towards your, it's like, this one is what we call it is like one of the best way to shoot an arrow, because you can use the full of your muscles, and it is used for hard and strong targets. And then this is like for the perfect shooting, there are the 4 main principles, of course, as Shram, which is concentrated effort, Askalit Dristi, which is steady vision, and both practice will lead to the Shigra Sandhana, which is perfect to fast shooting, and Pranayam, because absolute control of your breath is so important while you're shooting the bow or any other martial art you're practicing. And then the last one, they say Guru Shamaksha Shram Kriya means you constantly practicing in front of your guru or the teacher. If you're making any mistakes, you need somebody to correct you. So that's, they say, the four main principles for the perfect shooting. Now, there's a long distance shooting, or called the Durapatnam. And in these pictures, if you can see it, that particular archer here and then the archer in the back here is using Pratyalidya or Alidya, but in both the painting, because it seems like the shooters are right hand. So it's using the Alidya. And with the three or feminine type of arrows, when you draw the Pataka Musti, this is how basically you use for long distance shooting. And then it's called the Dradbhedam, which is piercing or striking the hard object. So this is one archer. This is actually the story from Ramayana, when the Sugriv come to Bhagwan Sri Ram to get a help, and then he asked that I want to see how strong you can able to hit the target to help me to against my brother. So Bhagwan Sri Ram basically pierced the 7 different arrows in a line using this particular pose, and that pose called the Asampada. And with that, you can use the Vajramushti and the Purush type of arrows, and Skandavya, which is basically up to your chest. So, and in the same picture, you can see in the front archer doing the same way, and also here, which the bow is missing, but it's a similar way. So these kind of pose is used for is piercing or striking the hard objects. And then there's a couple of other instances too, but I didn't able to add it because it was not super important. But then I found this one is really interesting, because we all, like especially in India, we heard a lot about the Shabdabedi Bhanuvidya, and a lot of people think that is not possible. But actually in the Dhanurveda is defined with proper procedure, that how you can practice it and how you can basically get expert in it. And it says that, you know, you basically put the target from the 3 feet from you, and like any copper or steel plate, and there's another person keep hitting a stone or the pebble to create the sound. And once you're able to focus on the sound, where it's coming from, and you start hitting it, you basically keep practicing. And mostly they suggest that you practice in the dark so you can't see it, but you can able to hear much better noise. And then once you start getting more and more better, they say you keep increasing your distance from 10 hertz, 20 hertz, 200 hertz. And this is one of the most advanced archery in Dhanurveda. And this is just a prediction of the painting of Prithviraj Chauhan between 1149 and 1192, who shooted the Muhammad Gauri when he wasn't believed that anybody can do it. And then he basically used that and used to kill him. Then the yoga, breath control in shooting, they also talk about in almost every Dhanurveda book I read it. They say like the breath control is one of the most important part of this particular martial art. And they say like pranayam cycle, which is like Purak and Kumbhaka and Risaka and Sunyaka. So this is like a whole breathing cycle. And once you're able to control it properly, and when I do sometimes my practice for archery, I basically, after Kumbhaka, I release the arrow when I release my breath. So that's how I'm able to practice more and more, so I can able to focus and concentrate when I do my own training too. Then they talk about army division, or then in the olden time they used to call Chaturangini Sena. And Chaturangini is basically 4 elements of the army. And in Indian armies, there are 4 different sections. It's like elephant, war chariots, horseback or cavalry soldiers, and then the foot soldiers. So in Chaturangini Sena, I just need to give like one more point here, that the modern day we play the chess game, and in the Gupta period, around 3rd to 4th century, that's when actually chess was invented, and it used to call Chaturanga, which was actually derived from Chaturangini Sena. It is more like a strategic game, and nowadays, modern time, we call it as a chess, but that's like the original name of the game. And so they basically talk about the importance of the elephant chariots in the army. And they say elephants are used to train for marching in the front and entrance forest forts, breaking walls, creating fear in the enemy's army, and making new roads and cleaning existing one. Chariots used to fill the gap in second line, protect the elephant, keep the enemy distance, block the enemy, stand at the head of the battle. And then the horse is like horse soldiers is used to obtain the knowledge of the woods and country and the road protection of a land troop, and uh, going far away, performing rapid movements and destroying hostile troops, and frightening the enemy by nagging. So there's like all the properties of all the duties basically they define in there. And then the foot soldiers have like clearing the wells and passages, making roads, camps, and royal tents, and protecting the garnets and arsenal and treasuries, making the fortification and defense of the army. And then in the Niti Prakashika also, they also talk about the units, like how they used to measure the number of chariots, elephants, foot soldiers, or infantry, and the horseback soldiers. So in here they have it like the first unit is a patti, which is one chariot, one elephant, 5-foot soldier, and 3 horseback soldier. And then Senamuk and Gol Gun, Wahini, Pratan, and Kamu, Anikini, and Akshuhini. So of course these are huge numbers, but they basically define in Nidhi Prakashika in particular chapter 3 that how they used to have an army division over there. And then, of course, though everything is fair in war, but it's still in ancient time, we used to follow the ethics of war in Dhanurveda. And the way they say is that we should not lay down the weapons on anybody who is supta, who is lying down, on prasupta, which is sleeping person, udmata, a mental deranged man, and akacha, one who loses undergarments, shastruvarjit, an unarmed person, bal, a child, a stri, a woman, deen, or a weak, therefore he surrendered, and the one which is a fleeing man who is run away from the war. So, but then this particular stri thing changed in the modern, like a later time, because a lot of female archers and warriors was a part of the army. From Mauryan time till later, almost every army used to have like a whole infantry of female archers or female warriors. And then, of course, in India, we always talk about the philosophy and the Dhanurveda philosophy. Dhanurveda also talk about the philosophy that if a shooter can concentrate in technically perfect execution on each shot. So example, if you're practicing with 3 arrows or 5 arrows, always focus on that one arrow when you're releasing at a time, and don't forget about what you did in the previous arrow and what gonna happen in the next arrow. So it's more like the way they say that you basically practicing not with the 5 arrows in one practice session, you basically practicing with 1 arrow in one practice session, and you're doing 5 different practice sessions. So that's how they say always concentrate and focus on the arrow you are releasing at that moment. That's the secret of Dhanurvidya. Now let's talk about the composite bow in the 3rd section. And composite bow of Indian subcontinent is, so I did talk about all kind of bows in the Dhanurveda when we started. And here you can see that whenever or the long bow, so there are some tribes from Kerala. So this guy is from the Kerala, and when I was talking about the joints on the bow, you can see there's a bamboo joints here, and these joints they say like 3, 5, 7, and 9 are important when you basically use the bow. And this particular tribe, a picture from the Odisha. And this is another Vitastika, which is a smaller bow for a smaller arrow. It's also from the Bhil tribe from Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan. They use this type of bow currently. And this is more like a composite bow or the Trinath bow. Trinath means the bow which bend at 3 sections, so which is like first curve here, second curve here, and the third curve here. That's how they used to define it as a Trinath bow or Sarang bow, which is horn bow. Now, the oldest pictures or oldest sculptures I found is the Mauryan era time, which is between 322 and 185 BCE. And if you see these particular two sculptures, is from this one is from the Sachi Stupa, and this one is from the Barhut Stupas. So if you can see the shape of the bows here, or this is more like a Trinath or Saranga bow, they're using the composite from that time. And then there was like some artist from Russia. He basically did some work on like painting to see from these particular sculptures, and he come up with like, yeah, they used to have like this type of composite bow, and this whole looked like a more like a long bow in the Mauryan army, and that's kind of army used to look like at that time. It's just his prediction. And then the second one I found is the Sangam or Chera kingdom, so which is with almost 600 year rule, with 300 BCE to 300 CE in the Tamil Nadu and Karnataka and Kerala tab in the current geographic. And Sangam, the Chera kingdom was actually started by the archers itself, and those archers used to have a title of Vellavar Khan, which means the archers in Tamil. And these archers are the founder of the founder of Chera kingdom. And you can see their coins also. They put these composite bow shapes on their coins, and with their prediction, with the coin prediction, we can able to see that they are more like elephant archers, because they have like ankush, which is like to drive the elephant, and then the another side they have an elephant. So the importance of the archery or the composite bow they were using at that time. Then the third one is I found with Satavahanas dynasty, which is from the 2nd century BCE to 3rd century. And these particular painting is like from, the first one is from Amravati, which you can see the elephant archer using the similar kind of bow. And then there's a horse archer is from the Kanaganhalli. It is an archaeological site now, and which shows the horse composite bow, which have like the horse archer, and also have the 4 different quiver here. And then the third one here is the painting of Ajanta caves, which showing the longbow or the foot soldiers of Satavahanas army. And just one fun factor I wanted to add up, that after Alexander left India, and there's like a lot of other governors who was still ruling, and after Mauryan took over the most of the northwest area of India, and control it, there was like another group of people used to call the Shakas or Scythian. They were like one of the best archers at that time. And Alexander basically went over, and they was part of Alexander's army that time. But later when Alexander died and things changed, they created their own kind of like a small kingdom in the northwest, where it is Gandhar and Afghanistan now. And they used to attack a lot in India at that time, and they used to call Indo-Scythian kingdom. And Satavahanas are the one who basically destroyed them, and almost there was no Scythian left after that. There was like some maybe archer group, but the whole kingdom was like destroyed by Satavahana. So they used to call it the mighty Satavahanas. Their army is one of the best army at that time. And then we have a Gupta period, which is between 320 to 600 CE. And the Gupta period, like you can see the importance and the use, because they're using the gold coins. And that's also, we used to call that the golden period of India, because they use the specific gold coins. And in the gold coins, all their coins, and these two are different. Person one is Samudragupta from Gupta kings, and then the Chandragupta II, having these composite bows using. So another story of the Gupta Empire also is when there's a tribe from the Central Asia called the Huns, Hun Hun tribe, and they are one of the most devastated tribe at that time. And the China actually built the Great Wall of China to save China from them. And those tribes actually destroyed almost every civilization in Central Asia and Middle East. And then when they attacked India, Skandagupta is one of the ruler of the Gupta period, is actually stopped them, and they never able to conquer India. And they waited for 30 years before they attacked back in India, because Skandagupta destroyed their army so badly in the time of Gupta period. And those are the same Han tribe people who actually destroyed the Kushan Empire and destroyed the Takshila University, because a lot of people know about the Nalanda University was destroyed by Bakhtiyar Khilji or other university, but not much people aware of what happened to Takshila University. It was actually destroyed by the nomadic tribe from Central Asia. And then there's the Chalukyas dynasty between 6th to 12th century, which is almost 600 years. And they basically are the one who write the Manasolas, like one of the king, who is Someshwar II. I put the 3 by mistake, it's Someshwar II. And then the Chalukyas are one of the royal dynasty of India, and they used to rule on the current Gujarat, some part of Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Karnataka. And in there, they put a specific that they inside as a woman expert in the archery to appointed as a bodyguards of the king. And I also read about in the Kautilya Arthashastra also talk the same thing, that their elite soldiers or the elite army of any king is always the female archer. And they always say that the female archer is one of the best till 18th century of Deccan Sultanate. So there's a lot of people who always praise, and especially they say the women from the Karnataka were famous for defending their home. So they are one of the best archers at that time. And in this picture, this is basically from Jain temple in Palitana. And this is the beautiful picture of the female archer using a composite bow with this Skandatra from the Nureda. Then there is a Vijayanagar Empire between 1336 to 1646. And Vijayanagar Empire was actually founded by 2 brothers and started in the rebel of the Tughlaq's rule in Deccan. And this is one of the more southern India rulers, and from current place of Karnataka, Andhra, Telangana, and I think some part of Kerala too. So they used to rule for almost little over 300 years. And then that time they are more famously using the longbows or Venava bows in their army, but and they don't have much of the horse archers. So they basically hire, because during this time the Turkic composite bow is getting a fame in the Middle East, and they basically are more famous. So Devraya II, it's believed that the king Devraya II of the Vijayanagar Empire hired 2,000 Turkish soldiers or the horseback soldiers to teach the art of the archery, which basically more about the archery of horse, horseback archery, to the soldiers in his army. And that time, because the particular Vijayanagar Empire are using only longbows. But you can see in this particular painting that from Vijayanagar temple, from the temple in Hampi, is using a composite bow and the horse. And then the Maratha Empire. Maratha Empire is between 645 and 1818, and that's was founded by Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, and it raised from very small army. But these pictures of the general named Bajirao Peshwa, and he have a history of he fought 41 battles in his lifetime and never lose one battle. And in these paintings you can able to see he's using the composite bow with his quiver here, and then also here his soldier is basically carrying composite bow and the quiver here. And then Rajputana and the Sikh Empire. Well, the Rajputanas are have a long history from 10th to 11th century, but I just combined it here, and I will show in the next slide how they used to have a bows that time. So what happened is, like, during the 1800, early 1800 till 1900, due to colonization and a lot of Anglo-Sikh war, Anglo-Sikh war, Anglo-Maratha war, and after First War of Independence in 1857, the British banned almost all the local weapons, and including the composite bow, and replaced with the modern guns, which made archery almost disappear from whole Indian subcontinent, because the last rulers was the Sikh Empire, who was using pretty strongly, and Rajput Empire both, but mostly it was gone after that. By 19th century, there was like almost no archers remaining. Very few archers was practicing all over India. And at that time, they used to have two different type of bows they were still making as a composite bow. And the first one, called the Dhanush or Kaman. Kaman is just a Persian name of Dhanush, because Mughals come that time between 1500 to 1700, and they used the Persian terms too. So they use Kaman there, and then which also in the modern term we call the North Indian crab bow, because its shape looked like a crab. And the second one is the Trinat or Charkham, which is the four curve bow of India. It's again the Persian name for that, but the original name is Trinat. And here there are some paintings I found it from Rajputana empires that you can see the use of the composite bow. They were doing pretty heavily in their army, or a lot of for hunting purposes here. That this particular king is using it, and there's a female archer he's posing for with the composite bow. And then there's a Sikh Empire, and in the Sikh Empire, this is the picture of Guru Gobind Singh. He's the founder of Sikh Empire and the 10th Guru of Sikhism. And he is actually one of the, this is one of his oldest painting I can find from 1800. So we can assume that he's somewhat similarly look like this painting. And he's holding this composite bow, which is more known as a Kaman or the North Indian crab bow. This one is hard to predict. It's Kaman or Charkham or Trinat bow, because of the shape is almost hard to predict, but he's another general of the Sikh Empire. And then there's another female archer you can see with the spear. So you are seeing that, we are having a female archers from all over the history. And then there is another guy just holding a bow and the arrows here. And this is two paintings I found from the London Museum website, where they basically having the whole catalog of what kind of weapons Sikh Empire used to use it. So that's where I found that they have different type of bows, quivers, and arrows here. And then there's one painter or sketcher who sketched this painting, that how the Sikh Empire army used to look like. And this is the antique bow, which is Kaman and Dhanush, we can call it, is from early 18th century. And I find this from Mandarin Mansion. This particular website is run by Peter Decker, and he is one of the antique collector. And he basically have these I basically found a lot of interesting information on his website, like a lot of antique bows and arrows from all our different timing of our Indian history. So this one is like Kaman or Dhanush in the Devanagari, and this is mostly from early 18th century. But with these particular paintings, it's more look like Sikh or a Sikh Empire bow, because I saw a couple of other from the Lahore Museum have a similar painting. So it's hard to know exactly where it's from, but because it's more like a North Indian composite bow, so we can say it's somewhere from the Sikh Empire because of the paintings on it. And then the Charkham and the Trinat bow, which is like, these are the different bows I found, the different paintings in different museum and different places. So it is also called the four curved and bent with the three places. And this bow is one of the mostly widespread in all over the India, from southern India to North India. This particular bow is the one which is using the most in all over the India. And but what happened, this particular bow, there was a bower who was still making this bow till 1900, early 1900 in the Sindh region. And that's when the modern time, a lot of the modern bow builders or a lot of modern bowers used to call it as a Sindh bow, because it is the place where they found the most lost piece, because these are all the bows basically from the antique collection, and those bows are from mostly from the Sindh area. So that's why it's used to call now Sindh bow, but it's more like, with the shape we can see, it's more like Trinad bow. And in Indian Museum, there is, in Junagadh Museum, you can see there's a Trinad bow here, and then there is a Kaman bow here, or Kaman Dhanush bow here, with different type of arrows you can find, and there's small arrows too, which used for nalikas. And then there's another one here, is a steel bow, which I didn't put in here because it's for only composite bow, but India used to use the steel bows also. And then there's another one from Alwar Museum, where you can able to see all these arrows and more like command bows. Now in the modern day archery, you know, this is now we calling the main Indian bow, which is almost a replica of recurve bow from the Olympics. And I think just like, you know, in this particular page, I want to say that I think need to rethink about why we calling some recurve bow, which is made up of bamboo, as an Indian bow, because India have a huge history and we have so many different type of bows. So I think we need to focus on like how those bows were, and like long bows and or the small bamboo bows or the composite bows, like so many different bows, but we still only focus on that one type of bow, which is almost replica and is only good. It is good for practicing for Olympics, but it's not good for our arts as a Dhanurveda, and we have so much knowledge. So I think we should rethink and re-promote our teachings and of Dhanurveda, and re-promoting how to make that particular our ancient techniques of the bow. And I was talking with some people online, and they basically told me that in Rajasthan, especially in Udaipur, there's a Siklikar community who basically made different type of composite bow still with the regular bamboo horn, sinew, and animal glue. And that's more like a become tradition and family business for them. So I think we just need, I never able to come in. I did talk to a couple of families, but I didn't able to find like who actually still making it. So hopefully we'll find someday, and we'll see how we can able to re-promote our ancient culture and our past martial art and techniques of Dhanurveda. So I did talk in the, so there is one Vijay Archery Academy in the town called Kaddappa, which is close to the Tirupati. And this guy name is Uday Kumar, and he basically is one of the, I think one of the only person I'm aware of, other than there is another guy named Subbarao. He's a priest in one temple in Andhra also. So he's the one who basically promoting the Dhanurveda as a traditional way, and helping a lot of different archers in his Vijay Archery Academy. And also he told me that I talked to him this week. I talked to him on the phone, and he told me that he basically called Vijay Archery Academy because of the Vijaya bow from Karna in Mahabharata. So he say he wanna put some specific name of his archery academy, and he's helping in promoting this art. And before I can end the presentation, I just want to talk about this one last slide, which is the brave stones. So when I was doing my research and looking information, I found that in a lot of parts of India and Pakistan, we have so much brave stones, which basically is more like we glorify our soldiers or our warriors from almost 1000 BCE till 1800 century. And we basically used to create like these kind of brave stones to tribute those archers or tribute those soldiers who basically fought in the battle, or or win the battle to give them a tribute. And I think it's really awesome to see that we are doing this from so many years. And I never knew that thing. So that's why I just put that particular slide here just to share with everyone. So yeah, that's all the presentation for today. And thank you.
Pankaj, I wanted to share. We recently had hosted, not recently, sometime back, had hosted Professor C.K. Raju.
Okay.
And in one of his talks, he mentions Plato's Meno, where actually he says that all knowledge is remembrance from the past lives. And that's what was coming to my mind. You must have been either a master of archery or somebody related in some past life that you're remembering all of this.
It's,
So
you
I'm
know,
like,
it's so funny that it's actually started from nowhere. I was just looking like, something, reading about it, and suddenly I follow that Armin Himmer, and then I was like, this is so easy. Like, sometimes we think like, oh, archery is so hard and stuff, but when I start looking, it's amazing to see. And then later I was just like, well, let's see what we can do. And then I start practicing by myself.
very nice. It's surely coming from the past somewhere.
I was really surprised with your talk. Means it's so much interesting and scientific way you have presented. So I have two questions basically.
Yeah.
So you mentioned about the bow head, arrowhead, but
Yes.
what is about the base? It has some feathers. So what is the role of that? And the second question is about the leg position. So
Mm-hmm.
the leg position has any role in the strength of the means strengthening the your impulse on the arrow, or it has something to balance your own body?
So for the first question, the feather thing. So feather, basically they used to use it for flying the arrow in the correct trajectory and the correct direction. Because if you don't have feather, sometimes arrow goes pretty quicker and sometimes it doesn't fly the way you want to fly. So it helps with the, with the wind and with the direction of the trajectory direction of the arrow. And that's why they used to use the arrows. Oh, sorry, feathers on the arrows. And for second question, so the leg position is important because depend on what kind of bow and what kind of distance you want to cover. So like I show in a couple of slides that for the distance target, you have to use alidya or pratyalidya, because the reason that if you get the proper pose, you can able to have like more better control on your body while you're releasing the arrows versus and then the Dradmukha is another one which is for the heavy arrow. So when you have a heavy bow, you need to put more strength and use your knee, and so although the stance is defined for particular purposes based on what kind of bow and arrow you are using at that time.
My question is, are there any schools of Dhanurveda right now available throughout our India, like specifically in northern region? Because I saw like in southern there are still some of the schools who
Mm-hmm.
who teaches ancient martial arts and other things. But northern area, I mean, I see very less school, or I guess I mean no knowledge about I'm having. If you can share it, then it would be good for.
So in northern India, the only place I am aware of is like there is a archery association, which is Ladakh Archery, and they do a lot of traditional practice. But I'm not aware how much they follow the Dhanurveda itself. But they have a proper teaching and techniques of archery in Ladakh, and in the northeast also there is in the Manipur and. There are I'm forgetting the exact which state it was, but they have like a regular archery of not the Olympic way, but they have different archeries practicing. They are doing it, but I don't know exactly if they are following with the Dhanurveda or they're just following their own practice. And in central India, a lot of the tribal area, you can see a lot of people still following the same way, like the Bhil tribe in Madhya Pradesh or in Rajasthan. They are basically following the same tradition. But with the proper systematic schooling or systematic training, I don't think so we have anywhere other than that one Vijay Archery Academy, which I'm aware of it.
What problem do you find in our Olympic archers? Because they usually, I have observed, they don't reach beyond quarterfinal. Or some, because I feel we are born archers, Hindustanis.
Yes, so I mean, with the Olympics, if you compare, there's a lot of restriction in the Olympics. Like you have to follow with proper arrows and proper distance, like proper stand and this type of bow. And also one more thing that you cannot put on the, if you are a right-hand archer, you have to put on the sorry, if when you hold the bow on the left hand, you have to put the arrow on the left side, not on the right side, because they have a specific arrow pass. So they have like so much restriction. So even you are like, because this is more like for us, it's always as a art. It was not like in a sport of particular concentrated on just to follow the rules of those things. So for Olympics, yes, it's good what we have it, but unfortunately we can't able to open up because in Dhanurveda or in the ancient archery, the way they used to use it is more as an art, and they're basically able to open up and practice way more. And I think that's why we had much more better archers that time versus nowadays. That's my guess, because if you restrict yourself and you cannot able to open up, and you only, because you have to use only 3 finger to pull the bow in Olympics. So there's a lot of restriction in Olympics versus what we can able to do it.
That's actually what they have done in almost every sport, from hockey.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So basically, wherever we were winning, we were restricted by some change of rules. And we basically started rules. Kabaddi, wrestling, hockey, everything has, the rules changed as we were won, and then we went down the drain completely.
Pankaj, thanks for the very nice talk and very informative. So did archery start in India or in Central Asia? Because the Mongols were pretty good archers, right?
Right, they were really great archers, but if you can able to trace back, it's almost impossible. Like where the original archery started, because in Indian subcontinent wise, like I show in my slide in the archery history, that we have some rock paintings up to 30,000 year old. So we have archers at least 30,000 year old. And most recently, only this month or like end of the June, they found out that they found some artifacts of bow and arrow in Sri Lanka, which is 48,000 year old, which is the oldest ever found. So, but this is what they found. But unfortunately, we don't have much, archaeological digging in India, because there's a lot of places currently working on it, and hopefully we can find something like that. Like Sanoli, when they did that chariot, they found some degraded bow and arrow there too, which is 2500 or 2500 BCE. So we have like a history from way beyond. Versus the Mongols like Genghis Khan, who basically conquered the Europe and Middle East. That time was like 10 to 11th century, which is way after we used to have an archery in India.
My question is that sometime back I saw this video on Sangam Talks itself, when where Guru Nidar Singh, he is the teacher of Sanatan Shastra Vidya. So Guru Nidar Singh, he is the teacher of Sanatan Shastra Vidya. He is telling in that video that Dhanurved is almost Dhanurved is lost. So would you like to comment on that?
So when we say Dhanurveda lost, the original copy of Dhanurveda as an Upveda is lost. But we have a lot of literature available, like at least like the literature I put it in the slide, which is like 7 to 8 different books. We probably have more than that, but this is in my knowledge, we have it. And in my knowledge is like, there is like the way it's defined is pretty detailing. And but then when we call the particular Upveda, like we have Ayurveda or Gandharveda or other books available, we don't have that particular, as we call it, as a Upveda of Yajurveda. So that particular copy or manuscript is missing, but there is other manuscripts have a lot of information of archery.
Well, I have one more question.
Sure.
So I saw this movie. Perhaps some more people would have seen this. So it's called Arjun, the Warrior Prince. So in that
It
movie,
is a Disney movie, right?
yeah, I guess so.
Yes.
So in that movie, Arjuna in the Draupadi Swayamvar shoots the arrow from underwater. So
Right.
is there anything mentioned about underwater archery? in
No,
the
it's
text?
just a movie, I think.
All right. All right. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you everyone for joining today, and